What's up, y'all? Welcome back, OTB. Okay, again, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button. We got a lot of y'all in there right now. That'd be awesome. And that's still 250. Let's get that up to 300. We're going to talk about LSU throughout this hour and the game on Saturday and what it means from Saturday, what it means going forward. I think, Jake, the place to start would be on the defensive side of the ball. And again, we're going to break down everything. But you mentioned during headlines, and it is absolutely the thing that after what better place to start when you look at what happened against Mississippi State a year ago compared to what happened on Saturday. You came out there with a disciplined and excellent game plan. Okay, the game plan that we yelled about for years and years that we wanted to see you do, come out, rush 3 against Mike Leach, drop 8 into coverage, and force Mississippi State to play underneath you, right? I mean, what did we say last week when we were talking about how this Mississippi State team works? We said that, like, they're a team that you got to kind of force to make them it's weird because, like, they want to kill you with 1,000 different little cuts, but ultimately they're not always capable before they blow up. Like, their style of offense requires them to rewrite 9 out of 10 times, 10 right. out of 10 times. So at times it feels like, oh, you can't stop them. They're just going to roll over you. They're getting it 4 yards here, 5 yards here, 4 yards here. But what do we say? If you continue to play discipline, they will implode. The same way they did against Memphis. The same, like, it was not a fluke what you witnessed out of Mississippi State's offense on Saturday. What LSU did is what has been proven to work against Mike Leach for his entire career. So it became very ironic when in the third quarter, Jake, all of a sudden, like, still when Mississippi State only had 3 points, there was a very loud faction of people on Twitter yelling about the lack of a pass rush and the 3-man rush and what the hell are we doing? No, that was the entire point of what you were doing. Because what Mississippi State wants you to do is to feel like you're not getting home, feel like they're overwhelming you, and then you get more aggressive, and that's when they start hitting you on chunk plays, and that's when everything falls apart. So excellent job by Durante Jones. Excellent job by these guys who have learned to play better zone defense. And, I just thought the game plan, even though at the end they did start to feel a little bit of that pressure, the game plan was fantastic.
And I was wondering, are they going to try to get away from what they're doing because Mississippi State is trying like hell to get them out of it by running the football. They're trying to establish the run to get you out of your 3-man front, knowing that it is tempting to go to a 4-man front because the rushing lanes are just going to be bigger naturally when you have a 3-man front. And credit LSU and their defensive staff for not taking the cheese, like you mentioned last week, right? They didn't do it. They stayed with what they had. They had a 3-man front. They're playing cover 3, and that's just what they were going to do. And it worked out, right? Yeah. One of the touchdowns, I believe when it was 28-3 to make it 28-10, that was one of the few busted coverages that you saw.
Yep.
There was a lot of really good individual plays in this game. We mentioned Cordell Flott. I think this might be his best game in an LSU uniform. The defensive linemen, even though there was 3, even though they didn't get home, they still did a nice job of creating pressure the best you could with 3 guys there. They were with the bigger defensive linemen. When you had Mason Smith and you had Neil Farrell and you had Ali Gay out there,
big boys.
It was a big boy lineup. So I thought the linebackers did much better. There was a couple of times their coverage lanes, they were a tick off, but for the most part, the defense did their job. Jay Ward being back there certainly improved everything. I felt like it just cleaned everything up. So, yeah, at the end, I know it did get a little fishy, but
well, and also, how many plays did they run offensively?
Almost 90. I think it was 88.
I mean,
it was 88 that it charted.
You know, look, you can only do so much as a defense, right? And that's where we got to. That's where, unfortunately, Jake, as we'll kind of talk about, LSU offensively has some unfortunate parallels to Mississippi State. In that, because they too they can't really run the ball as consistently as they want, they too are kind of reliant on executing 9 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times on a drive to be successful. And so, yeah, like once you get up near 90 plays, the defense is going to do whatever the defense does. And also at the end of the game, it was a bit interesting that on the last couple of drives, after Mississippi State made it 28-10, it does feel like the pressure maybe started to get to the coaches a little bit because that next drive they came out and went 4 down every single play. And that's when the 13 completion streak really started again. So, ironically, the thing that everybody was yelling about, LSU too kind of was like, okay, maybe we do need to do this. And then that was Mississippi State's most successful drive of the day by
their easiest
far, was when they went 4 down. There's just more space. There's more space. But, well, okay. So, if we're talking about why it worked, though, Jake, to me, first off, I love the team attitude, right? Second game where you come out completely locked in, force a fumble touchdown off the bat, bam. And a first half where it ends up 7-3. You set the tone immediately. That was great. But to me, what I keep coming back to, dude, is the aggressive closeouts from the defense as a whole, but mainly from that secondary. Because that's the only way this works, right? Is you force them to dump the ball underneath, and then you get after their ass and you tackle well. Like, that's how you play great defense. When Durante Jones was talking about playing with violence this offseason, this is what he was talking about. So, I mean, Cam Lewis, Cardell Flott, Jay Ward, Major Burns, Ryan McLaughlin, Eli Ricks, they all had moments where they just came up and delivered a hit. They swarmed to the ball. Thought it showed up in the run game as well. Like, to me, it was the first time this year, even though they've had really dominant performances, but competition, all that, it's the first time this year where this defense felt fast and intimidating, and they played a little mean, a little bit like a bully. And so I think the secondary really set the tone for the entire game.
I thought they did as well. And just getting the quarterback of the defense back. And I know it's like such a cliche, like whenever you say, you got to get your free safety back because he lines everybody up. But that was factual. Like when you look at what LSU did defensively, there just wasn't the breakdowns that they had in the weeks prior. Like UCLA, you had multiple. You even had multiple against Central Michigan that we broke down over the week. And we talked about how important Jay Ward was going to be for this defense coming into the year. But it was nice to see him because it also allowed Major Burns to play a different style of defense. It allowed him to be a little bit more aggressive, kind of play within what his strengths are compared to maybe, being the calming force back there, because that's just not his game.
Yeah.
Which is great because you want to have different personalities back there. And we've talked about Cordell. Dwight McLaughlin had really one time that he got beat with the quarterback overthrew him in the end zone. The guy did a nice job, move off the line and beat Dwight McLaughlin there, but I thought he played a great game. Elias Ricks had one busted coverage, but outside of that, I thought he was physical in the intermediate stuff. So the LSU defensive backfield, I thought, played their most complete game without question.
Yeah, and so cutting out on the bus, like that's the reason why it all worked. That's the reason why, even though Will Rogers had 4 or 5 seconds every time he had the ball, why he had to hold on to it so long, and why so often he was forced to check down and then deal with just these little 3 or 4 yard games was because of that secondary. And then the other guy can't get away from. So if Cardell Flott is defensive MVP #1, I mean, he had the tackle force fumble, which looks like just like Stingley's. He climbed in the air for that pick. That was beautiful. He had great tackles as well. So if he was defensive MVP #1, Neil Farrell is right behind him as defensive MVP 1B. He was fantastic.
A couple times he almost got there. He disrupted the play. He didn't make the play, but he disrupted it and pushed it outside. Did a really nice job getting up the field.
Consistently, disruption, which is what you want from your interior defensive tackle. You don't want them to have tackles. That's great if they do, but you want them to disrupt, and that's what he did. And really, I felt like he did an excellent job of setting the tone early on when Mississippi State went and got down there to the goal line. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Oh, yeah, so it was 3rd and goal for the 2, and you end up holding him instead of 7-7. Neil Farrell's penetration blows the play up. You end up holding him to 7-3, and that just kind of continued throughout the night for Neil. And he's had a really good year. I mean, we talked about it from the PFF grade last year. He's already had a really good year, so shout out to him continuing that very strong year.
There's one comment I'd like to get your thoughts on here from Brooks inside the Bayou 4 chat. My biggest gripe about the defense was they didn't show any variations of a 3-man rush. We could have lined up with 4 defensive linemen and only brought 3. Make the O-line wonder which 3 were actually coming. I understand what you're saying, Brooks, and I even talked about it last week. We thought maybe they would do that. B.J. Ojulari would be the guy who maybe dropped into coverage. But they went in with a game plan to not do that and to get an extra defensive back on the field.
Exactly.
They decided to get Cam Lewis on the field. So when you're watching this, who would you rather have in coverage, B.J. Ojulari or Cam Lewis? And that's what they went with. They went with that. And they decided to go into a game, and that was going to be the game plan. And the rushers, like T-Bob's mentioning, like Neil Farrell and stuff, they got pressure on the quarterback. They might not have gotten home more than once, but they did create some pressure that if you go back and you watch the tape, there's some throwing lanes that were taken away from the pressure. So I get that this kind of defensive game plan sometimes can stress people out because the quarterback's got more time and you led the country in sacks coming in. But to T-Bob's point, their easiest drive was when you tried to be a little bit more aggressive, when you tried to play those 4 down defensive linemen. That's just what you have to do against Mike Leach. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's a little worrisome at times because you're not getting that pressure, but you have to know at the end of the day that's what you have to do, or you'll have KJ Costello come into your stadium and set the SEC passing record. Okay?
Yeah, it requires great discipline because it's very boring at times, and you feel like you are being passive when you're not really being passive. You're being fundamental and disciplined. And while, yeah, sure, you could have, like you said, had 4 down and then only rushed 3. The value of the extra DB on the field was so obvious. It's why Rodgers had nowhere to go with the ball. If you have a D end like Ojulari, who's not especially used to dropping into coverage, dropping in on some of those underneath routes, he's not going to come up and make the tackle like he did. He's not going to occupy the space as well as the safety did. And again, this is why I like this, okay? We yelled for an entire year about wanting coaches to bend to what the situation and to adapt to the situation at hand, right? That's what Durante Jones did. This is not a game plan you're going to carry forward against any other team. Like, this was specifically for Mississippi State and Mike Leach, and Mississippi State and Mike Leach alone. And that's good coaching. That is the sign of a good coach. And you continue to see these coordinators grow. So, look, I still got a bunch of individuals I want to talk about. That was the defensive side of the ball. When we get back here and off the bench, let's go ahead and maybe switch over to the offensive side of the ball. Keep it locked right here on OTB.
All right.
So we talked about the LSU defense. Let's talk about this LSU offense. Again, I mentioned starting the game locked in. So LSU sets you up with the big turnover, which, by the way, shout out to Damone Clark, who had a pretty fantastic game on Saturday. I love the fact, and I hate this, but Moscona pointed this out, so I'll give him a little bit of credit. But I know.
We're the 2 best friends.
I know. Relax. But Damone Clark did do a very good job of being disciplined, recognizing on that fumble, I got room. Let me make sure to scoop this thing up, because it was the first half that ultimately, like we said, in 7-3, not a lot of consistent drives, so every piece of yardage you gained mattered. Damone's extra, 30, 40 that he tacked onto that? It ended up paying huge dividends as LSU goes down and managed to make it 7-0 off of the bat, immediately kind of setting the tone for the game. And what I love is on that first drive, you had a 4th down conversion, which was fantastic. A zone run as well, so a little bit of big boy football. You had to pull it off. By the way, I don't think the QB sneak works in this team.
No,
I think
don't either.
The same way that we moved to the QB sneak last year because objectively it was working when you had TJ Finley's just 6'7", 400-pound giant back there. It does not work with Max in this line. But you had the 4th down conversion. Then on 3rd and 9, you managed to do a touchdown. And because we're going to talk a lot about Max, Jake, the 3rd and 9 is so important to focus on because it represents such a clear growth point where Arnett attacked him on that play in the same way that UCLA did, right? They're like, okay, it's 3rd and long, obvious passing down. We're going to go cover 0. We're going to come after your ass, and you have to prove to us that you can make the right decision. What did he do? He knew he was accountable for the unblocked man off of the edge. He steps up and avoids him. He delivers a touchdown to Keyshawn Butte. It was just such a clear rebuke of the very thing that had defeated him just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and I really thought that it kind of shied Arnett away from bringing cover 0 more, and the fact that Max showed, look, I can handle this, because in your first situation, right, when times get tough, when you need a play, if the defensive coordinator goes to cover 0, that's typically going to be like his call for the game. Like that's what he wants to go to. We used to always joke, like whenever times got tough for John Chavis, he was going to go to Bear defense. That's just what he was going to do. He was going to go to Bear, and he was going to have a bunch of guys in the middle of his defense. Okay, well, it felt like that. Then Max made that play, and Arnett had to kind of rethink what he was going to do in those situations. Was Max perfect in this game? No, he was not. I mean, definitely an underthrow on the interception there. He had Deion Smith with a step on the defensive back. You got to put some more air on that. You had your feet set. You didn't have pressure. But also the Cole Taylor touchdown, and I know Orlovsky kind of broke it down. I like Dan Orlovsky, but I think he broke it down saying, I don't even know if he was looking at him. I was sitting in the end zone looking at Max's eyes. He threw that ball where he knew Cole was going to be because Cole asked him what route he had before the play. and he threw it where he knew he was going to be because he had real pressure, and he kind of put it into a spot where he knew Cole would run there. If you go back and you kind of watch it, it's a heck of a play.
Yeah, I actually, for what it's worth, it's good to hear because I did not agree with Orlovsky's. I didn't think it was clear cut that he was throwing to Butte. I couldn't quite tell from my angle, but the replays, I mean, it didn't make it seem like that was 1,000% going to Butte. So
no, so he threw it exactly where he thought. Because, like I said, if you'll go back, I don't know if the TV caught it, but Cole kind of comes up to him and Max gives him the route, right? And then they go line up, and he knows. And so anytime a quarterback gives you your route, he knows exactly where he wanted to put you, and he put the ball there. It was a nice job. Anticipation. Now, you can't count on the defensive backs running into each other, but it happens. You got to take advantage. You got to go score.
That's what great play design does as well, right? So, if that had happened against LSU, we would give the opposing coach credit for it. So you have to give Jake Peets credit for how that play ends up working out. So Max goes 17 of 27, 280 yards, 4 more touchdowns, 1 pick. All the dude does is throw touchdowns. Again, I want everybody to take a step back and really appreciate what you're seeing and how warped our perspectives have become, Jake. This man has started, 6 games now in his career. He has thrown at least 3 touchdowns in every single start. He is a true sophomore leading the nation in touchdowns. Well, I'm assuming he's still leading. I guess I got to double check. We can do that in a second. But he has 15 already this year. Is it perfect? No. But if we could somehow, erase our brain of Joe Burrow in that 60, if you could just somehow go back a couple of years and be like, hey, I'm from the future, and this is what LSU's quarterback play would be, we would tell you to F off. It would be like, there's no way you're from the future. That's impossible. That's impossible. We've been sitting here for 15 years. We know what it's like here. That's impossible. That's where we're at now, is that we think that cat, that's a true sophomore, 6 games with 50 scores, and we're like, is he even good? What are we talking about? Yes, he is young, he is growing, and he is only going to get better and better and better. And I think that's personally very exciting. Now, do you want to add to that before we talk about maybe some of the things to work on and where you go from here?
No, I completely agree with you. And is there some things that could be cleaned up? Yeah, every quarterback outside of 2019 Burrow had things that you could clean up, even the great ones. And I know he's a lefty. I know the ball doesn't just burst out of his hand, but that doesn't matter. Those are the things that can't matter to you, right? Whenever you need a play, he has been that quarterback that has given you that play. Yeah. To start his LSU career, he holds every single record that you can in the first 6 start span in your LSU career. And he is doing a lot of great things with the ball. And again, I know it might not look the same as 2019, but to T-Bob's point, he is second right now in the country in touchdown passes. Dude, the only person that has more is Tanner Mordecai from SMU, who's a veteran player.
I mean, think about it, dude. I used to champion Danny Etling, and I still think in the context of where you were, rightfully so, but I used to champion Danny Etling for a season, which on the year, he had 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 picks, and that felt good. Yeah. That felt very step above what you were doing. Max has 15 touchdowns now through 4 games.
He's got 1,144 yards, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So,
and look, on the pick, absolutely. And I know a lot of people are kind of victory lapping, well, I told you last week before the SEC play, that ball be picked off in SEC play. It's still not going to be picked off every time. Majority of the time it's going to be complete, but whatever. My point is, I don't care. Don't be scared to throw that ball. I want you to continue to take those shots. When you really start to fail is when you're no longer down to do that, and which is actually why I loved the response from Johnson after that, coming out and just kind of flushing it and then immediately come back out in the second half and making that big play. And I even liked when they chose to take that shot in the context of the game, Jake, where I think so they took one early on 3rd and 4 that went incomplete. And then they gotten sacked to start the drive. Then they get it from 2nd and 19 to 3rd and 11. They end up getting that first down, which is a pretty big counter punch after a sack. And they're like, okay, let's really try to bury them. So I like the play call and I like the shot pre-play. It just didn't work that time. But don't be scared. Keep doing it.
Yeah, don't be scared. And that one wasn't a true 50-50 ball. Central Michigan, that was a 50-50 ball. Yeah. This one was slightly underthrown more than that. So you got to learn from it. You got to be able to put some air on it. Your receivers are nobody else type mentality. And that's one of those ones that you're going to take that matchup, to T's point. You're going to take that matchup. You're going to take that one-on-one coverage with your receiver against a corner like that when you are trying to take a shot, when you're trying to make a play. So I have no problem with the play. You just got to put some more air on it. Last week, the same receiver took it off the defender's head, but here he's kind of falling down a little bit, and there's got to be more on this throw. But we're sitting here nitpicking kind of a interception here. I think Max learns from this and will kind of do it a little bit differently moving forward. Didn't get gun shy after this, though.
No, did not, which is important to point out. And again, the only way to get better at this stuff is to practice it, right? So keep practicing, keep sharpening it, make it a weapon you can use against anybody. Should Deion Smith, from a receiver perspective, do you think I know he's in a tough spot trying to run full speed, and then it's underthrown like that. Is there any world where he maybe could have fought more to break that thing up?
I mean, maybe. It was a little awkward, the position that he was in. It kind of looked like he was almost hopping right here as we're watching it. You know what I'm saying? He's kind of in between hops.
It was your feet get crossed. It kind of is what it is at that point. Maybe just whatever. Like whatever. In a perfect world, sure, maybe you can break it up in your quarterback, because that would help you feel a little bit better as a quarterback too, if you know a guy that at least is going to go up there and kind of protect you from that. Okay, so there's so much to talk about here. Last thing on Max, and we got to go to break, and we'll come back. I thought that look, his footwork is still a bit sketchy. His greatest weakness is still probably a little bit of accuracy that kind of wanes in and out. But I think that if you consider the offensive line, the protection, kind of how quick his clock has to be, some of the hits that he's taking, you're seeing clear improvement every single week from Max.
If I'm not mistaken, he's only taken 6 sacks, is I think what I saw. That's amazing that he's only taken 6 sacks behind the protection that he's been given. Now, there's been a lot more hits. There's been a lot more hurries, and that's got to get cleaned up. But he's also done a nice job of not taking a sack, finding a way to either get rid of the football, get it off, or whatever the case has been. Because behind that offensive line, we know that he has been sacked or pressured way more than most quarterbacks. And so for him to only take 6 sacks, he's got a good pocket presence to him.
All right, so we have to go to break, and then, look, we got so much more to get to still. It's kind of crazy how long-winded we can get at times. Me, mainly, I'm saying there. Okay, when we get back, we'll close that hour one night. Let's talk about the offensive line real quick.
Do we have to?
It's still, look, it is the Achilles heel on this team. It will remain the Achilles heel on this team, but we still want to judge it for some of the things that we saw. I loved the 4th down conversion on the first drive. The reason why is I kind of really like the play design. So what they did is, Jake, they left the front side defensive end unblocked, and they froze him with that little toss jet sweep that they've been running where, they put a guy in motion. I think this time it was, who's number 2 on offense?
Coy Moore?
Yes. So it was Coy Moore. He's coming in front of Max Johnson. Max Johnson fakes a little pitch, and front side defensive end freezes.
Yeah.
Well, I like the play design is what everybody else did. Knowing you only need one run, don't think. Everybody just wedge and go, and so everybody on the front side just completely crashes down. I mean, hip by hip, no climbing to the second level, just get push. They got pushed. They got the first down. That was nice to see, right? One of the few times where you did get the push that you were looking for. Look, I think that a couple of things that you were looking at was left tackle. Obviously, Garrett Dellinger starting there. Dellinger was not a disaster. I don't think he was also, though, an unquestioned success, right? He looked like a freshman in that I think probably the MAs are why they end up making the switch. A bit too many missed mental assignments, which I completely understand, dude. I didn't understand a playbook for like 2.5 years probably getting to college. So, he's forced into a bad situation, right? I feel on the other side of this game, I still don't think the left tackle question is settled. I think Anthony Bradford, though, just from sheer size, may be your best option. He will get burned against maybe some speed rushers with better pass rushers on this schedule, but a lot of guys will just struggle to get around him just because he's so damn big. So Dellinger was all right. I think Bradford was a little better. Shanahan remains who he is. Maximizing his physical talents. It's just that there's a definite limit on those. Mm-hmm. I am worried. I was watching Kentucky this weekend. They got a big nose, dude. A big, powerful boy. I'm a little worried about stuff like that, but Shanahan is who he is. Ed Ingram's struggles continue, unfortunately. Again, just feels like a batter in a slump, trying to see if he can break out of it. The bright spot to me was Chasen Hines. And not that Chasen Hines was perfect. He made mistakes too, but he plays hard. He actually plays with a little bit of meanness. When he was pulling around on some of these counters, he was really bringing it, which I appreciated. He looks athletic when he moves. He moves his feet well, does well in space, doesn't look like he's freaking out when he's got a little bit of a buffer zone around him. And he, to me, just is the first lineman that I've seen this year that seems to completely, like, to play with a little bit more of that. Now, Bradford plays a little nasty as well. It's just it's a little bit slower to get to where he's going than maybe someone like Hines. Like Hines, I think he's a huge upgrade at right guard for this team. And while it's still not going to be a good offensive line, you are much better with Chase and Hines at right guard.
Yeah, you mentioned Bradford. As soon as he went in, his presence was felt because it was that counter run that set up the counter run, fake action, play action, touchdown to Butte. I mean, that was a back-to-back sequence there, and you could tell they put him in there and said, we're going to run right behind you, right? And he does a nice job on that play, does a nice job on the next play where he scored a touchdown. And he will struggle probably with your speed guys like you're mentioning, right? Because that's a position that he is not really trained for. He did a little bit in training camp, but
he's too big to be on that island, bro. I mean, he is a big boy to be out there on that island.
But right now, just with the cards that you're dealt, that's your best option. Now, Cam Wire was dressed for the game. Now, he didn't play in the game, but he was dressed and taped up. So I don't know if it was an emergency situation, if he would have tried to go. His status this week could be big. I don't know if you roll him out there not playing in a couple weeks and test him. I think you have to.
Yeah, because he's actually, now that we mentioned, he probably is still your best option. Even though he was struggling pretty badly at the beginning of the year, we've seen him play better in that. So, yeah, maybe Wire's still the answer. But, yeah, that goes back to his health.
Yeah, so
which we don't know.
We don't know. And if you want to put a 70% Cam Wire out there, I'd go with Bradford. Because there was some things, like you mentioned, that Bradford does do well, and just his size alone allows him to do. In the run game, obviously, like it's going to be an improvement because you have a road grader guard out there playing tackle, and it's not fully there's not a lot to work with the running backs. There's just not. Like when you go back and you watch the end zone copy, there was some zone runs though early in the contest that LSU's running backs could have had some nice cutbacks that he didn't see. Now, T, how much of that is because they weren't trusting what they've seen in the past, right? They're thinking, there's no way. I've seen that cutback on film. It's not going to be there. Yeah. And you kind of predetermine what you're going to do. There was some of that, and not just one back. It was a couple of them. And as an offensive line, as you know, you've got to start to allow your back to trust his keys, read his process of going through it. Because anytime you get gunshot running back and you predetermine where you're going to go, you're not going to be successful.
I actually thought that TDP ran the ball as well as anybody this game. And if we're going to criticize, then I also want to give credit, right? And, I mean, he ends up with 13 carries for 51 yards, which, again, if we have to grade everything on a curve. And grading on the curve of LSU rushing attack this year, that's actually wildly successful. And so not only did TDP run the ball well, but he pass blocked very well once again. I mean, he continues to bring a lot of value in terms of picking up the blitzer and keeping Max upright. So I thought this was a great game for Davis Price. Now, Kiner, you saw the flash.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't jump. Yeah, you're going to learn that. I mean, he probably knows that now.
No, he did it. He did it in a scrimmage as well.
And it was awesome.
Well, the first time.
Oh, okay.
The second time was kind of the same outcome that he got on Saturday. That's something he's got to grow from, but he did hit a nice spin move to get to that point.
Yeah, and a stiff arm. We saw two good kind of stiff arms again this game.
But he'll learn that on the sideline like that, that's the worst place to jump because the boundary is also a defender. So he's big enough.
The defender doesn't have to go low. They can go high if you're on the sideline. Yeah,
so just drop your shoulder, pick up some extra yards. Now, in the middle of the field, if you want to do that one-on-one with the DB, he goes low, hurdle that man. But there was some nice flashes from Goodwin, from Kiner on the outside. Yeah. I agree. TDP, with what he was given, I thought he did a better job of reading his keys. So it's slowly getting there. I think they're slowly figuring out what that rotation needs to be and what they want it to be as well with the play designs.
Okay, so any other thoughts here? I am enjoying the evolving play design. Like we said, a lot of stuff done off a counter day. You had the sequence to open the second half where you run a successful counter for 10 yards. Then you run the same play. Well, it's just an RPO, right? But the safety bites, and so Johnson makes the perfect decision, perfect throw, Keishawn Butte touchdown. Then later in the game, you ran that same counter look that turns into a wide receiver screen where everybody blocking down on the front side on counter, they just keep going, right? It's like you're blocking back, and then you act like, oh, okay, my job is done, but you just leak out, and then you're leading Keishawn. So, you're again, growth points for Jake Peetz and company. Okay, here's maybe the last question I have offensively, Jake, is one thing I would have loved to see. I would have loved to see a little, and I know the defense was playing well, but I would have loved to see more faith in the offense, and I think you go for it on 4th and 2 at Mississippi State's 42, especially on a day where State is gaining yards. Right now, blowing up in the red zone, but they're generally driving the ball pretty well. LSU put an odd kind of, well, I don't know if I could say odd, because I guess I understand the logic, even if I don't agree with it, where they put a premium on the 30 yards or 20 yards gained by a punt, maybe thinking, okay, if Mississippi State has to run more plays, they'll open themselves up to more mistakes. But on a day where they're gaining yardage, I just didn't agree with it. So you had
You're talking about before half?
2 of them, twice, yes. So
before the half, you absolutely have to punt there.
You want to punt there?
You have to punt there.
Why is that?
Because you're controlling the narrative defensively. I understand that. But you get the ball back before half. So if you try a long field goal attempt and you got the best kicker in the country, but for some reason, somehow, some way he misses it, and you give them the ball right there and they go down, even if they get a field goal and they cut to 7-6, but if they make it 10-7 in that, you have to know that you get the ball and you have to trust your offense. You pin them back down there and they don't get points before the half. In that situation, I'm completely okay with them punting it because you get the ball back to start the second half.
So that one then, that's if, I mean, look, yeah, so you are talking about the difference between do you value 10-3 versus maybe 7-6 and how much risk are you willing to engage with. I'm okay with that. And to be clear, I'm saying they should have gone for it, not kicked a 59-yarder. Or maybe they should have. I think where they absolutely potentially should have, 4:37 left in the third quarter, you're up 14-3. You have the ball, the Mississippi State 42, so you've got a nice little scoring cushion here. You got 4th and 2. To me, modern-day winning football, when you have a successful offense, is to go for that and try to put the nail in the coffin there. They didn't, and the problem is you punt it, and you punt in the end zone, and then you've gained net 20 yards.
Yeah,
that's not worth it.
Right, that one's completely different. I'm in line with you on that one. The clock and the other one was kind of what my decision would go into, knowing you get the ball back. But yeah,
and that's
exactly
fair.
Right.
I mean, Leach did just run out the clock, so he accepted the 7-3 score line at half. But yeah, third quarter, I would have liked to see him go over. Just a little food for thought. Not that it's necessarily 100% one way or the other.
Yeah, and the 28-10 lead, the offense had to do something to be a little bit more aggressive. I think we can all agree there, because you needed to give your defense something, and the defense held on. And they were on the field a ton, 88 plays. And if the offense just does anything in that situation, I feel like the game's over, nails in the coffin, and you move on, and it doesn't obviously get as tight there. You just needed a ball play in a couple of those series.
Yeah, I mean, if it's this simple sometimes. If Max makes a more accurate throw on that third down, I think Besh probably gets it, right? I mean, Besh almost got it. I think Besh caught that ball.
Yeah,
on that third down. It's just that it wasn't called to catch. I agree there wasn't enough evidence to obviously overturn it, but it looked like he actually did catch it. Okay, other notes. Mason Smith, the defensive end, is going to be very interesting to watch this week. He did well. Still has. It's tough to judge this game. I want to see how he does against things big in this run team. Finally, special teams, cover units, fantastic as normal. Something we take for granted. Trey Palmer, obviously the punt returner. That needs to be the guy on this team. Like Coach O talked about all of the hidden yardage lost on punt return, and they completely eliminated that this week. Not only did he have a couple nice returns, but there's even one where, remember, he caught the ball at a dead sprint on the sideline. So not even allowing the opportunity for that ball to take some crazy bounce, stay in bounds, and cost you another 20 to 30. So you saw a problem, and you saw a direct response to that problem. Yeah. And I like that Palmer was rewarded with that blown coverage touchdown for putting in some good works in special teams.
Yeah, there was a couple of times. One, I think it was the second quarter, where Trey Palmer just ran right past a defensive back. Max saw it but couldn't get to it because that was one of the sacks. I didn't know that. So I saw him immediately go to Mickey and kind of tell him exactly like what he saw. Now, it was a busted coverage, but Trey Palmer did a nice job kind of all game long getting behind the defense. And that's something I would expect him to come back to. But again, to throw shots like that over the middle of the field, you got to stop that interior pressure. You got to have your quarterback be able to step up in the pocket to deliver a ball like that.
So, I think that's kind of it in terms of our overall film review. LSU, Mississippi State, a battle on the road in Starkville. Again, not as close as the final score made it out to be. Granted, I mean, look, and people tried to play this same game. I think it was in 19 when Texas came down to an onside kick. You get an onside kick like 1 out of 10 times, and then you still got to go. Like, it's not. It is close. I get it, right? Mississippi State had a nice rally late, and LSU definitely could have done a better job closing out offensively, like Jake said. Defensively, I'm not really judging them too much because just kind of the nature of the game at that point, how late it was, how many plays they'd run. So LSU could have been better, but it wasn't that close either. LSU really controlled this game for the most part, beginning and end. Okay, here's the last thought. Mike Leach, what are you doing, dude? So you're sitting here trying to come back. You call a zone run on 1st and 10 with 2 minutes, 30 seconds left, and then you immediately call a timeout. So you call the run play that forced yourself to call a timeout, and then you challenge a play in which you clearly, it's obvious, like there's no reason to challenge that onside kick, and you cost yourself any mathematical out that you had. That was just, that was shocking.
And I don't know what he saw. I mean, I was from me to Danny from the onside kick. It clearly didn't touch anybody from LSU before Mississippi State touched it. I get that it's like a last-ditch effort, but you have to know that LSU struggled to run the ball. You have a timeout. You're going to get an opportunity if you just allow it to play
30
out.
seconds, right? I mean, yeah, you would have saved the
play
play
had
clock.
some time.
Yeah, you theoretically could have saved the play clock.
You would have had an offensive play, but you didn't because you challenged a bad play that was not even remotely close.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Know,
I appreciate it.
I still can't get over the run with 2 minutes, 30 seconds left. Then you had to call a timeout because of your own running play. Like, what is that about? What you tried to zig too hard when they thought you were going to zag. Like, there was no need for it, dude. You got a little too fancy, but we'll take it. Hell yeah. Thank you, Mike Leach. So now LSU wins, and we look forward to a certified banger this weekend, Saturday night in Death Valley. Let's get to some weekend winners next here on OTB.